On Father's Day, I received a package on our porch, wrapped neatly as if it was a gift. My wife, Linda, glanced at it once, and her face drained of color. She whispered, almost trembling, "Do not open it." I frowned, confused, and asked her what she meant. She pointed at the side of the box and said, "Can't you see?" I bent closer, my chest tightening, as I noticed the detail I had missed. My breath caught in my throat. In that instant, I understood what kind of game my daughter was playing. I did not open it. Instead, I picked up the phone. 10 minutes later, flashing lights from a police car lit up our driveway. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment. What would you do if your own child sent you a Father's Day gift that could have killed you? The package had not even arrived yet, when the cracks in our family truly showed themselves. 6 days earlier, my daughter Rachel stood in our living room with a wine glass trembling in her hand, her face red from anger. She had just accused me of being selfish, of hoarding money while she and her husband were drowning in debt. The glass slipped and shattered against the hardwood floor, red wine splashing across the quilt that Linda's mother had made for us when we first bought this house. Rachel's hands shook as if the weight of her own words had startled her. But her eyes never softened. She was locked in combat with me, and she meant to win. I held the inheritance document so tightly that the paper creased beneath my fingers. 35 years of careful work and planning, reduced to scraps in my own child's tantrum. "Rachel," I said, my voice slow and deliberate, "you will get your inheritance when the time comes. I am not a bank you can withdraw from whenever you feel like it." Mark, lounging on our sofa as if it belonged to him, leaned forward with a smirk. "Come on, Michael. She is your daughter. What's a few thousand to keep her head above water?" "A few thousand?" I snapped, my voice rising against the weight of years of swallowed anger. "Last month it was 6,000 for your gambling debts. Before that it was Rachel's credit cards maxed out on shopping. Before that, rent for the apartment you cannot seem to keep. Do not call it a few thousand. You treat me like a bottomless account, and I am tired of it." Linda appeared in the doorway, clutching a dish towel so tightly it twisted in her hands. "Please," she whispered, "let's not do this again. Everyone, sit down. We can talk like a family." Rachel spun toward her mother, her voice cutting like a knife. "Talk? What is there to talk about? He sits on hundreds of thousands of dollars while we fight to pay bills every month. How is that fair?" "Bills you created," I said firmly. My voice carried the weight of disappointment more than rage. "Debt from your choices. Debt from Mark's gambling. Debt from your refusal to live within reason." The family photograph on the mantel had been turned face down during the argument, and the silver frame glinted in the light, mocking me. I did not know if it had fallen or if someone had deliberately hidden those smiling faces. Mark leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees as if he were delivering wisdom instead of leeching from us. "Look, old man," he said with a sneer, "you are not getting any younger. Why not share while you are alive to see us enjoy it?" That word, old man, landed heavier than it should have. My mouth went dry, not because of my age, but because of the sheer disrespect. Mark had never worked a steady job, never shouldered responsibility, and yet he stood in my house, spitting insults at me as if I owed him something. "I worked for 43 years, I said, my voice breaking like thunder. 12-hour days, missed vacations, every overtime shift that was offered, so my family could have comfort. Rachel, you had ballet lessons, summer camps, a car on your 16th birthday, college textbooks, even your wedding when I could not really afford it. All of it was given with love. And now you stand here and accuse me of greed?" Rachel laughed, but it was bitter, hollow, like glass cracking under pressure. "Greed? What do you call locking away money while your only daughter is suffering?" Her suffering looked different to me. It looked like the designer purse draped over her chair. It looked like the salon highlights in her hair and the expensive watch on her wrist. It looked like Mark's sneakers, brand new, costing more than my weekly groceries. I saw comfort disguised as struggle, entitlement dressed as need. "Rachel," I said coldly, "your suffering is self-inflicted. You created every storm you now demand I rescue you from." The silence that followed was suffocating. Linda stepped into the room, pale and trembling. "Michael," she whispered, "maybe we should—" "Should what?" Rachel shrieked, her voice cracking like lightning. "Should keep enabling you? Should keep pretending you are a loving father when you are just a miserly coward?" The words hit harder than the wine glass had. Miserly, coward, unloving. Decades of sacrifice reduced to insults. I had swallowed so many accusations before, but that night something inside me shifted. Mark stood now, his posture heavy with menace. "You know what I think? I think you like it. Watching us struggle makes you feel powerful." "Get out," I said, my voice low but filled with a finality that made even Linda flinch. "Both of you, get out of my house." Rachel's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into something between a smile and a snarl. "Your house," she spat. "This house that Mom helped pay for? The house where I grew up? You cannot just throw your own daughter out." "Watch me," I said, walking to the door and pulling it open wide. The cool evening air rushed inside, carrying with it the faint scent of lilacs from our neighbor's yard. Across the street, children's laughter floated through the dusk. Families were sharing normal evenings while mine collapsed in front of me. Rachel stayed rooted, her heels digging into the floor as if refusing to surrender ground. She was waiting for me to fold, to write another check, to save her from herself one more time. I had always bent before. Not this time. "Take your husband and leave," I said without turning. "Do not come back until you are ready to talk like adults about your own financial mess. Without my wallet." Her face hardened into stone. She grabbed her purse, her voice dripping with venom as she hissed, "You will regret this. When you are old and weak and need someone to take care of you, remember this moment. Remember that you chose money over your family." Her heels struck the floor like gunshots as she stormed out, Mark trailing behind her with one last muttered threat. The door slammed so hard the glass in the frame rattled. I stood there, hand still on the brass handle, staring through the decorative glass panels at the taillights of Rachel's Lexus as it roared out of our driveway. Linda stepped up beside me, her voice thin and afraid. "Michael." The house was silent again, but not peaceful. The quiet was heavy, like the pause before a storm. I stood in the silence of my own house, the echoes of Rachel's accusations still clinging to the air like smoke after a fire. My hand was still pressed to the doorframe, but my thoughts had already drifted years into the past. I could see Rachel at 6 years old, standing barefoot on a kitchen stool, pouring too much syrup on pancakes she had proudly made for me on Father's Day. Her giggles had filled the house then, innocent and free of calculation. I had believed I would always be her hero. Now, decades later, she had looked me in the eye and called me selfish. I walked into the living room, lowering myself onto the sofa that still carried the shape of Mark's weight. I stared at the quilt stained with red wine and thought of the other stains that did not show, the years of financial sacrifices I had made for Rachel. I had taken double shifts at the plant to buy her that dollhouse one Christmas, the one she had begged for when she was 8. I had skipped entire weekends of rest so I could afford the ballet lessons her friends were taking, because I never wanted her to feel left out. I had worked overtime for the car she got on her 16th birthday, and I had even sold my vintage truck to help cover her wedding. Every sacrifice had felt worth it, because I thought I was building her future. But somewhere along the way, those gifts had turned into expectations, and those expectations had hardened into demands. I had not raised a grateful daughter. I had raised someone who believed my wallet was an endless well. Linda entered quietly, sitting beside me without a word at first. She placed her hand on my shoulder, her touch grounding me even when the rest of the world spun out of control. Finally, she said, "She will come around, Michael. She is just angry right now." I shook my head slowly. "No, Linda, she is not just angry. This is who she has become, and we helped her become it." My phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping me out of my thoughts. At first, I thought it was one of my co-workers checking in, or maybe a notification from the bank. But when I picked it up, my chest tightened. The message was from Rachel. "Dad, I hope you are happy. The kids need winter coats and school supplies, but apparently your precious money matters more. Do not expect to see them anytime soon." I stared at the words until they blurred on the screen. The grandchildren, Emma and Jacob, innocent children, 8 and 6 years old, now being wielded as weapons in their mother's war against me. Rachel knew exactly where to strike. She had done it before, cutting us off from the children for a week, sometimes 2, whenever I said no to her requests. Each time, Linda cried herself to sleep, and each time I folded. I showed the text to Linda, and her face crumpled. She would not keep them from us. She knows how much they mean to us. But even as she said it, her voice wavered. She remembered just as I did. Rachel was capable of it. She had already done it. I set the phone down, my jaw tight. "Not this time," I said firmly. "I will not be held hostage anymore. I will not let Emma and Jacob grow up thinking that love can be bought, that family is just a transaction. If Rachel wants to cut us out, then so be it." Linda looked at me with wide eyes. In nearly 4 decades of marriage, she had rarely seen me speak with such cold finality. But something had broken inside me that night, and no amount of pleading would repair it. The days that followed were strangely quiet. For the first time in years, there were no desperate phone calls, no sudden visits, no new emergencies that somehow required money. Linda and I moved through our routines like we were stepping around the edge of a cliff, careful not to slip. The silence was unnatural, calculated. Rachel was not done with us. I could feel it in my bones. On Father's Day morning, I sat on the porch with the Sunday paper, trying to reclaim some sense of normalcy. The neighborhood was alive with the sounds of ordinary life. The Hendersons packing their car for a picnic, the Patel family laughing as they trimmed hedges together. I held my coffee, watching steam curl into the cool air, and wondered when my life had stopped feeling ordinary. Linda's voice drifted from the kitchen, the clatter of dishes mixing with the scent of toast and scrambled eggs. We had been speaking more gently to each other that week, as if afraid that any sharp word might open the wounds Rachel had left behind. The absence of her presence felt like a shadow that clung to every room in the house. Then I heard the sound of an engine slowing outside. A delivery truck on a Sunday. My brow furrowed as I set the paper aside and stood. I walked down the steps just as the driver climbed out of a brown van, clipboard in hand. "Michael Turner?" he asked. "That's me," I replied cautiously. "Special delivery. Someone must think a lot of you. Sunday service costs extra." He smiled faintly as I scribbled my name on his electronic pad. He handed me a medium-sized box, about the size of a shoebox, light enough to hold in one hand. I studied the label. No return address. Just my name, our address, and generic shipping details. My stomach twisted. Who would send something on Father's Day? I muttered. Linda appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. "What is that?" "I do not know," I said, setting the box down on the coffee table once I stepped inside. "There is no name, no sender listed." She frowned, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Michael, do not open it." I looked at her, baffled. "What are you talking about? It is a package. It is probably from the grandchildren." She shook her head and leaned closer, pointing at the side of the box. "Number look." At first, I saw nothing, just plain brown cardboard. Then my heart lurched. Tiny punctures lined the side, small holes that had been carefully made. Breathing holes? "Something alive," Linda whispered, backing away. I stared at the box, my pulse racing. The room suddenly felt smaller, darker, as if the air itself had grown heavy. From inside the cardboard came the faintest sound, a soft rustle, barely audible, but enough to make my blood run cold. I froze where I stood, staring at the box as though it might move on its own. My throat tightened, and I felt a sharp chill run down my spine. Linda had already stepped back against the wall, her fingers clutching the edge of the doorframe as if bracing herself. She whispered again, her voice trembling. "Michael, do not touch it. Something is in there." The sound faded, leaving the room in a silence so tense I could hear the pounding of my own heartbeat. I leaned closer, careful not to let my hands near the box. And that was when I noticed just how deliberate the holes were. Not random scratches, not shipping damage. Clean punctures, each one the size of a pencil tip, spaced carefully across the top and sides. Whoever sent this had known that whatever was inside would need air. "It cannot be from Emma or Jacob," Linda said, shaking her head violently. "No child would send this. Not on their own. Not like this." Her words barely reached me. My mind was already racing, connecting fragments of memory I did not want to piece together. The arguments, the threats, Rachel's parting words, the text message about the children. And now this. I forced myself to move, picking up the phone with hands that trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. My finger hovered over the screen, then I punched in 3 numbers I had never thought I would need to dial in my own home. 911, what is your emergency? The voice on the other end was calm, steady, professional, but my words stumbled out faster than I intended. "There is a package in my living room. It was delivered this morning. There is no return address, and it has holes in it. It is making sounds. Something is inside it. Something alive." "Sir, please stay calm," the dispatcher replied. "Can you describe the sounds you are hearing?" I looked at Linda, who nodded, her eyes wide with fear. Just then, the noise came again. A faint rustle, followed by something sharper. A hiss. It was low, almost like air leaking from a pipe, but there was a menace in it that raised every hair on my arms. "Hissing," I whispered, "like a snake." The dispatcher's tone shifted from routine calm to clipped efficiency. "Do not touch the package, sir. Do not attempt to move it. Please step back at least 6 feet. Officers are being dispatched to your location right now. Stay inside your home, but keep your distance until they arrive. Do not try to open it under any circumstances. I swallowed hard. We are about 6 feet away already. Should we leave the house? Stay where you are. If you can move into another room with a closed door between you and the package, that would be safest until officers arrive. I looked at Linda, who was already edging toward the kitchen doorway. Come on, I said, guiding her gently with one hand while keeping the phone pressed to my ear with the other. We stepped into the kitchen and pulled the door halfway shut, though I kept a line of sight on the box. It sat there, innocuous, a plain brown rectangle on the coffee table where our family photos once rested. But the sound inside it made it the most dangerous object I had ever seen in my house. The dispatcher kept me on the line, asking for details. How long ago was the package delivered? Less than half an hour, I said, glancing at the clock on the wall. The driver said someone paid for Sunday delivery. There was no name, just my address. All right. Officers are en route. Stay where you are and do not attempt to interact with the package. Help will arrive shortly. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Linda gripped my arm, her nails pressing into my skin through my shirt. Every time the rustling inside the box grew louder, she gasped, and I felt my stomach twist tighter. The silence that followed was worse. It meant whatever was inside was moving, adjusting, maybe preparing. At last, headlights swept across the front windows. A car door slammed, then another. The doorbell rang once, sharp and commanding. Relief flooded through me so quickly, I felt my knees weaken. I opened the door to find 2 uniformed officers standing on the porch. One was tall and broad-shouldered, his presence filling the doorway with authority. His badge read, Officer Daniels. The other, a younger partner, scanned the street before stepping inside. Mr. Turner? Daniels asked. Yes, I said quickly. Thank you for coming. It is in the living room, on the coffee table. He nodded, his tone calm but serious. All right. Stay back. My partner and I will assess the situation. Linda clutched my hand as we guided them into the living room. The officers approached the package slowly, their movements deliberate. Daniels crouched near the coffee table, inspecting the box without touching it. His eyes narrowed as he saw the puncture holes. When did this arrive? He asked without looking up. This morning, maybe 40 minutes ago, I said. No return address, just my name. Daniels nodded once. And you said you heard noises? Yes, I said, my throat dry, rustling and hissing. He turned his head slightly, his expression sharpening. Like a snake, I swallowed. Yes, exactly like that. He stood, pulling his radio from his belt. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the weight of his words. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I have a suspicious package. Possible live animal, likely reptile. Requesting animal control response to Oak Ridge Drive. Immediate? The younger officer stepped back, keeping his hand close to his sidearm, though it was clear he hoped he would not need it. The room was thick with tension. The box shifted slightly on the table, as if whatever was inside had pressed against one wall. Linda gasped and clung to me tighter. Daniels glanced at us, his tone softer now. You did the right thing calling us. Do not worry, we will handle it. Animal control will be here within 20 minutes. Until then, keep your distance. Linda's lips trembled. What if it gets out? Daniels shook his head calmly. The box looks intact. As long as we do not disturb it, it will stay that way. But you are right. This is not something anyone sends by accident. Someone wanted you to find this. The words cut deeper than I expected. I looked at Linda, and she looked back at me. both of us knowing exactly who we suspected. Daniels crouched again, listening carefully as another faint hiss came from inside the cardboard. He stood, his expression grim. I have handled a few cases like this before. Based on the sounds, I am fairly certain it is a snake. The words landed heavily in the room, and Linda's grip on my arm tightened until it almost hurt. My throat felt dry as I stared at the box that sat so innocently on our table, as if it were no more than a delivery of shoes or books. Knowing that something coiled and alive was trapped inside changed everything. Officer Daniels stepped back from the box and spoke into his radio again, his voice sharp with authority. Dispatch. Confirm animal control ETA. A burst of static answered. Then the reply came. 15 minutes. Daniels gave a single nod, then turned toward us. It should not take long. They will have the right equipment to handle this safely. Linda and I stood in the kitchen doorway, unwilling to move closer. I could see her chest rise and fall too quickly, her eyes fixed on the cardboard as though she expected it to explode. Another faint rustle came from inside, followed by that same chilling hiss. Daniel's younger partner shifted uneasily, his hand brushing the edge of his belt. Daniels gave him a look that carried both reassurance and command. It is contained. We wait. Those 15 minutes dragged longer than any I could remember. Every small sound seemed magnified. The tick of the wall clock, the squeak of a shoe on the floor, the faint groan of the house settling. And always, beneath it, the reminder of movement inside the package. When the van finally pulled into our driveway, Linda let out a shaky breath that sounded almost like a sob. A man in a gray uniform stepped out, carrying a long black case. His van was marked with County Animal Control Services, and his calm stride suggested he had seen worse than this. "Mr. Turner?" he asked as he entered the living room. "Yes," I said, moving aside so he could see the box. "Name is Mike Johnson. Let's have a look." He set down his case and knelt carefully by the table. He pressed one ear close, listening for a moment, then nodded. "Snake, all right. Not venomous by the sound of it. Probably a corn snake. But let's not take chances." He unclipped the black case, revealing heavy gloves, tongs, and a secure transport container. With practiced ease, he pulled on the gloves, then used the tongs to pinch the cardboard open at one edge. The moment air slipped inside, a sudden flurry of movement erupted. Linda gasped and clung to me, but Johnson stayed calm, methodical. Within moments, he had reached in and lifted the creature free. A 3-foot corn snake, orange and red patterned, writhed in the grip of his tongs. Its tongue flicked rapidly as its body twisted, searching for freedom. Johnson guided it smoothly into the transport container, snapping the lid shut with a solid click. "Beautiful specimen," he said matter-of-factly, securing the box. "Someone paid good money for it. Corn snakes are popular pets. Shame someone used it for this." Linda pressed a hand to her mouth, her face pale. Why would anyone send such a thing? Why on Father's Day of all days? Officer Daniels' eyes flicked to me, his question unspoken but heavy in the air. I felt the weight of his gaze, but I kept my mouth closed. My heart already knew the answer, but saying it aloud would make it undeniable. Daniels finally broke the silence. "Mr. Turner, do you have any idea who might have sent this?" I hesitated. The memory of Rachel's face, twisted with anger, flared in my mind. Her voice hissed back to me. "You will regret this. Remember that you chose money over your family." But alongside it was another image. Rachel, at 8 years old, holding a crayon drawing of the three of us smiling. under a bright sun. To admit what I suspected felt like tearing that memory to pieces. Maybe some prank, I said weakly. Teenagers in the neighborhood, kids playing games. Daniel's expression tightened just slightly. Sir, neighborhood kids do not usually have access to snakes, shipping materials, and your personal address. This took planning. And motive. Motive. The word stung like a blade pressed against my ribs. I rubbed my forehead, unwilling to meet his eyes. We had a disagreement with my daughter recently, but I cannot imagine. Daniel studied me quietly, then gave a small nod, as though filing the thought away without pressing further. I understand. Family matters can be complicated. Animal control lifted the container with the snake and carried it out to the van. The living room suddenly felt larger, lighter, though the memory of that box lingered like a stain. Daniels turned back to us. We can trace the shipment. If you want to press charges, we can pursue the sender once identified. Linda looked at me, her eyes pleading, searching for an answer. For a moment, I considered it. For once, I could hold Rachel accountable, make her face real consequences. Yet the thought of turning my own daughter over to the police felt unbearable, even after everything. I had protected her since she was born. Could I really hand her to strangers in uniform? No, I said finally, my voice low. I do not want to press charges. If it was a prank, it has already gone too far. Let's leave it. Daniels nodded slowly, though his eyes said he had heard the same answer from too many parents before me. All right. But if anything else happens, you call immediately. Do not try to handle it yourself. After they left, the house settled back into its uneasy quiet. Linda busied herself in the kitchen, scrubbing the counter as though she could erase the memory of what had sat on our table. I remained standing by the window, watching the animal control van drive away, my reflection faint in the glass. That was when it hit me. The charge on last month's credit card bill. At the time, I had dismissed it as a small oddity. Rachel had used my card for years, mostly emergencies, sometimes without even asking. But I remembered the name on the statement now, and my stomach twisted. Reptile World Supplies, $127.50. I sank into the chair, my hands shaking. I had thought it was some toy for the grandchildren, maybe an odd purchase I had not asked about. But no, now I saw it clearly. She had used my own money to buy the thing that had been meant to terrify me. I covered my face with my hands, shame and fury colliding in my chest. My daughter had crossed a line I never thought she would. Linda entered quietly, her face pale. Michael, she said softly, what are you going to do? I lifted my head and met her eyes. I need to know for certain. That night, after hours of pacing and staring at the silent phone, I finally pressed her number. My hands trembled as the line rang twice before clicking open. Dad? Rachel's voice was bright, almost cheerful, the same artificial tone she always used when she wanted something. Happy Father's Day. How is your morning going? My grip on the phone tightened. The words sounded like a knife wrapped in ribbon. If she was innocent, the question was natural. If she was guilty, it was cruel mockery. Interesting morning, I said carefully, keeping my voice even. I had a strange delivery. You would not know anything about that, would you? There was a pause, but only a short one. No, of course not. Why? What happened? Her words came too quickly, too smoothly, as if rehearsed. But then, in the background, faint but unmistakable, came the sound that shattered the last of my doubt. A low chuckle, a man's laughter, smug and satisfied. Mark's voice. The sound cut through me like a blade. It was not the laugh of surprise, not the nervous giggle of someone caught off guard. It was the smug amusement of a man who believed he had gotten away with something cruel. In that instant, every doubt I had been clinging to crumbled. Rachel had sent the snake, and Mark found it funny. I forced my voice to remain calm, steady. Nothing important, I said into the phone, keeping my words light. Just some confusion with the delivery. Do not worry about it. Are you sure, Dad? You sound strange, Rachel replied, her tone sharp with curiosity. Strange. That word lingered. She thought it was odd that I sounded unsettled on the very morning when I had nearly unwrapped a live snake in my living room. The distance between the girl who once drew me cards with stick figures and the woman on the other end of the phone had never felt so vast. Yes, everything is fine, I said, fighting to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Enjoy your day. I ended the call before she could reply, my hand trembling as I set the phone down on the table. Linda had been standing in the kitchen doorway, listening with wide, anxious eyes. She stepped closer, searching my face. You heard something, didn't you? I nodded, my chest heavy. Mark laughed. He was there. He thought it was a joke. Her hand flew to her mouth, her shoulders sagging. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was filled with all the memories of Rachel's childhood. The Christmas mornings, the birthday parties, the late nights spent helping with homework, and how all of that had led here. Finally, Linda whispered, "What are you going to do?" I looked toward my office, where the computer sat waiting, the glow of the monitor a faint promise of control. "It is time," I said quietly. "She has crossed too many lines. I will not let her hold us hostage anymore." That night, after Linda had gone to bed, I closed the office door behind me and sat down at my desk. The room smelled faintly of old paper and coffee, the comforting scent of years spent paying bills, balancing budgets, and carefully building the life Linda and I had hoped to enjoy in retirement. On the desk sat a leather folder, worn at the edges from 3 decades of use. Inside were copies of checks I had written for Rachel's emergencies, receipts from her wedding, transfers labeled urgent help that had become routine. Every page was evidence of my enabling. I opened the drawer and pulled out a stack of bank statements, flipping through them one by one. Each line item told the same story. Rent, car payments, credit card balances cleared. Money funneled to Rachel month after month, year after year, while she promised to change, but never did. My sacrifices had not built her stability. They had built her dependency. I turned on the computer and logged into the online banking system. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, then moved with a steadiness I had not felt in years. The first account was the credit card. Rachel had been an authorized user since college, when I told myself it was only for emergencies. 2 decades later, she was still treating it like her personal lifeline. The system asked if I wanted to remove an authorized user. I clicked yes. A prompt appeared confirming, "Are you sure?" This action is permanent. I stared at the words, thinking about all the times I had bailed her out, all the nights Linda had cried when Rachel threatened to cut us off from the grandchildren, all the mornings when my paycheck went straight into solving someone else's problems instead of building our future. My finger pressed confirm. The screen refreshed. Rachel's name disappeared from the account. Next were the automatic payments. I scrolled through the list, each one a reminder of her dependence. Her car insurance, her gym membership, the monthly transfer to her checking account labeled assistance. I canceled them all, one by one. Each cancellation felt like cutting a chain I had been dragging for years. Then came the PIN codes. Rachel had somehow learned them, probably by watching me at the ATM during one of her so-called emergencies. I changed them to numbers she would never guess. The year Linda and I were married. Numbers that represented a union that had endured rather than a daughter who had turned her back on us. The entire process took less than half an hour, but when I leaned back in my chair, it felt as though I had just set down a burden I had been carrying for decades. The glow of the monitor reflected faintly in the framed photo of Rachel as a child, smiling on my shoulders at a county fair. I reached for the frame and set it face down. For years, I had mistaken enabling for love. I had convinced myself that every check, every transfer, every bailout was a father's duty. But what I had really taught Rachel was that consequences did not exist. Tonight, that lesson ended. I turned off the lamp, the room falling into darkness, and whispered to myself words that felt heavier than any I had ever spoken. Tomorrow she will face consequences. The morning light streamed through the kitchen window, glinting off Linda's herb pots lined along the sill. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and for a moment it almost felt like any other Sunday. I sat at the table with the newspaper spread before me, savoring the rare calm. The knowledge of what I had done the night before, the revoked credit cards, the canceled payments, the severed lifeline, rested on me like a shield. For the first time in decades, I felt control. The phone shattered the silence at precisely 8:15. Rachel's name flashed across the caller ID. My stomach tightened, but I did not hesitate. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Dad." Her voice was shrill, frantic. "What have you done? My card is not working. I tried to buy groceries and it was declined. The automatic payment for my car insurance bounced. What is happening?" I took a slow sip of coffee, letting her words spill into the room without rushing to fill the silence. When I finally spoke, my tone was steady. "I ended it, Rachel. No more transfers, no more bailouts, no more free access." Her breath hissed through the line, jagged with fury. "You cannot just cut me off like this. I have bills, responsibilities, children. Do you even care about your grandchildren?" At the mention of Emma and Jacob, my chest tightened, but I forced myself not to flinch. Of course I care about them, but I will not be manipulated with their names anymore. This is about you, Rachel. Your choices. Your husband's choices, not theirs. There was a pause, the faint crackle of the line filled with her rapid breathing. Then she snapped, "You are insane. You think you can just punish me like a child? You cannot do this. You cannot treat me like this." I set the cup down gently. "I know about the package, Rachel." The silence that followed was heavy. Then she laughed, but it was sharp, brittle, the kind of laugh that masked rage. "What are you talking about?" "The snake," I said evenly. "The box on Father's Day. You used my own credit card to pay for it. Reptile World Supplies, $127.50. Do you want to keep pretending you had nothing to do with it?" Her voice wavered for the first time. That was nothing. Just a little prank." My blood went cold at her words. A prank. She had sent a live snake to her parents' house on Father's Day and called it a prank. "That was not a prank, Rachel," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "That was cruelty. That was calculated. And it could have killed someone. You crossed a line that can never be uncrossed." She scoffed, but I could hear the desperation beneath it. "You are being dramatic. Nobody got hurt. You act like it is the end of the world. Fine, maybe I went too far. But if you really loved me, you would forgive me. You would help me like you are supposed to. I closed my eyes, anger and sorrow warring inside me. I am done helping you destroy yourself. I am done enabling your husband's gambling and your recklessness. For 30 years, I let you bleed me dry. Not anymore. Her voice sharpened, turning vicious. If you cut me off, you will never see Emma and Jacob again. Do you hear me? Never. They will grow up without knowing you. When you are old and weak, when you are dying, do not expect your grandchildren to be there. Because I will make sure they forget you ever existed. Linda, who had been standing in the doorway listening, covered her mouth to stifle a sob. But I did not falter this time. Those threats do not work anymore, Rachel. If keeping us from Emma and Jacob is the only weapon you have, then it proves everything I'm saying. You do not want a father. You want a wallet. And I am finished being one. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then Rachel's voice came back, low and venomous. This is not over. You think you can humiliate me like this? You will regret it. The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly, my hand steady, my heart strangely calm. Linda stood there, tears in her eyes. But behind them was something else. Pride. For the first time, I had refused to bend. We sat together in the kitchen for nearly an hour, speaking in quiet tones, trying to prepare ourselves for whatever came next. The silence after Rachel's threat was heavy, but it did not shake me. I knew she would not accept what I had done quietly. The only question was how long it would take for her to strike back. The answer came sooner than I expected. It started with the roar of an engine outside. Tires screeched against the asphalt, too fast for a suburban street. Linda and I both froze, then looked at each other, the same thought racing through our minds. Moments later, a car door slammed. Then another. Heavy footsteps pounded across the walkway toward our front door. The doorbell rang once, sharp and demanding, followed immediately by pounding fists. Dad! Rachel's voice shrieked from outside, shrill and furious. Open this door! We need to talk! Linda's hand clutched mine, her nails digging into my skin. The pounding grew louder, rattling the frame. Mark's voice joined hers now, deeper, angrier, like thunder rolling under the storm. Michael, he shouted, you cannot ignore us. Open this door! I stood slowly, every muscle taut. The storm had arrived on my doorstep. Rachel's pounding fists rattled the wood, and Mark's booming voice echoed through the house. I walked to the door slowly, every step measured, each one heavier than the last. Linda stayed close behind me, her breath quick and shallow. But when I glanced back, her eyes were clear. She was afraid, yes, but she was not going to let me face this alone. I opened the door. Rachel and Mark stood on the porch like an army of two. Rachel's hair was disheveled, her face red, with rage, and her eyes carried a dangerous gleam I had never seen in my daughter before. Mark loomed behind her, broad-shouldered, his fists clenched as if itching for a fight. Dad! Rachel spat, her voice trembling with fury. You have gone insane. What are you thinking, cutting us off like this? Do you want us homeless? Do you want your grandchildren to starve? I stood in the doorway, blocking their path. Rachel, I told you yesterday, I am finished funding your life. You will have to figure it out yourself. Mark stepped forward, his presence filling the space between us. Old man, maybe you do not understand how this works. Rachel has expenses, bills, kids to raise. You have money just sitting there. You were supposed to share it. Linda's hand tightened on my arm, but I did not move. Mark, I said evenly, for 3 years, I have been bailing you both out. Rent, credit cards, your gambling debts, Rachel's shopping sprees. My retirement is not your ATM. Rachel's voice rose, shrill and sharp. That money is mine too. I am your daughter. You think you can just lock it away while I suffer? You are not suffering, I said coldly. You are living beyond your means. Look at you, Rachel. The handbag on your arm, the jewelry, the car in the driveway. That is not suffering. That is greed. And I will not be a part of it anymore. Her face twisted with rage. You selfish miser. You care more about your bank account than your family. Those words should have pierced me, but instead, they only hardened me. Number, I care about teaching you that choices have consequences. Something you have avoided your whole life. That ends now. Mark's fists unclenched, but only so he could point a thick finger at me. You are making a mistake. You think you can slam the door on your own blood and everything will just go away? You are wrong. Leave, I said, my voice sharp, final. This conversation is over. Rachel did not move. She stood with her jaw clenched, her eyes locked on mine, as if waiting for me to fold the way I always had. If you close this door, you will never see Emma and Jacob again. Ever. They will grow up thinking you abandoned them, and you will die alone. Linda gasped quietly behind me, but I did not waver. If you are the kind of mother who uses children as weapons, then perhaps they are safer without your influence. The shock on her face was almost enough to make me falter. Almost. But then Mark's voice cut through the moment, low and menacing. You know we live 10 minutes from here, he said. We know your routines, when you take your walks, when you get your groceries. When Linda is here alone, you might want to reconsider your position. Linda's grip on my arm turned to steel, her nails digging into my skin. My chest burned with fury, but my voice stayed calm. Are you threatening me, Mark? I am saying family works both ways, he sneered. You cut us off? You cannot expect us to sit quietly. We will find a way, one way or another. Rachel placed a hand on his arm, but it was not to calm him. Her touch seemed to encourage his venom, her eyes burning with the same hatred. You will regret this, Dad. I promise you. Family does not abandon family. Family does not extort family either, I said, my voice like ice. We stared at each other in a silence so sharp it hurt. For the first time, I think they realized I was not bluffing. I was not going to reach for my checkbook. I was not going to fold. The man they had relied on for 30 years to clean up their messes was gone. Finally, Rachel spun on her heel, storming back to the car. Mark followed, but not before leaning close enough that I could feel his breath. This is not over, Turner. Not by a long shot. I did not flinch. I simply held his gaze until he turned away. Their car engine roared, tires screeching as they tore down the street. I watched their taillights vanish into the distance before closing the door slowly, the click of the lock sounding louder than ever. Linda was trembling, her face pale. I turned toward her, and in that moment I saw the fear in her eyes transform into something else. Resolve. Michael, she whispered, her voice shaking but steady with purpose. We cannot go on like this. They are dangerous now. I nodded, my jaw tight, my chest heavy with the truth I had been avoiding for too long. You are right. I looked around our home, the walls that had once held nothing but love, now tainted by Rachel's threats and Mark's shadow. My voice came out quiet, deliberate, and final. We need legal protection. The words hung in the air like a verdict. For years, I had convinced myself that Rachel's behavior was just immaturity, a phase she would outgrow or the byproduct of Mark's poisonous influence. But after last night's confrontation on our porch, the truth was impossible to deny. This was not going to stop until we forced it to stop. The following morning, I made a call I should have made years ago. Attorney Harris had handled our legal matters for over a decade. Our wills, property transfers, even Linda's mother's estate. When I told her we needed urgent advice, she cleared her schedule and asked us to come in immediately. Her office was on the 3rd floor of a granite building downtown. The hall smelled faintly of polish and paper, the air quiet in that particular way that only law offices carry. Linda and I sat across from Harris at her heavy oak desk, the morning light streaming in through tall windows. She adjusted her glasses and leaned forward. "Michael, you sounded serious on the phone. Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the inheritance fight, the years of enabling, the snake in the box, the police visit, and finally the confrontation at our door. Linda added details I had not mentioned, her voice breaking at times, but Harris never interrupted. She listened with the calm gravity of someone who had heard many family disasters. But I noticed the tightening of her jaw when I mentioned the snake. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk. "This is not just a family disagreement anymore," she said firmly. "This is harassment, intimidation, possibly worse. We will address this on several fronts." My chest loosened slightly, the relief of hearing someone else acknowledge the severity of it settling into me. "What do we do?" I asked. "First, your will," Harris said. "You told me before you wanted your estate to go to Rachel and the grandchildren. That is no longer wise. We can restructure it so that Rachel and her husband cannot touch a cent. Instead, we create a trust exclusively for the children, managed by an independent trustee. That way, Emma and Jacob will have their education secured. College tuition, books, legitimate expenses. But Rachel and Mark will have no access." Linda's hand tightened around mine. She looked at Harris, her voice trembling. "That would protect the grandchildren from being used as bargaining chips." Harris nodded. "Exactly. Your money will serve their future, not fuel Rachel's debts." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I could imagine Emma and Jacob being safe from the constant cycle of manipulation. "Second," Harris continued, her voice steady, "we file a restraining order. After the snake incident and Mark's comments about knowing your routines, you have more than enough grounds. Once approved, any attempt by Rachel or Mark to contact you becomes a legal matter, not a personal standoff." The thought of turning my daughter into a name on a legal document twisted my stomach, but I knew Harris was right. Linda looked at me, her eyes soft but resolute. "Michael, it is time." Harris pulled a yellow pad toward her and began outlining the paperwork. As she wrote, she added, "You will also want to document everything, every message, every call, every visit. If they violate the order, the record will matter." I nodded. "We can do that." By the time we left her office, the will modification had been drafted, and the restraining order paperwork was filed. Harris promised the judge would review it the same day, given the seriousness of the threats. The house felt different that evening. The quiet was no longer heavy with dread. It was the kind of quiet that comes after decisive action. The calm that follows when you finally stop running from a storm and face it head on. 2 days later, Harris called. "Michael, the restraining order has been approved. Both Rachel and Mark were served this afternoon. They have also received notice of the will modifications. I sat down heavily in my chair, the phone warm in my hand. "It is done," I whispered. Linda, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped closer. "The papers were delivered?" "Yes," I said, looking up at her. "It is finished." She closed her eyes, relief flooding her features. Then she crossed the room and took my hand. We did not need to speak further. We both understood what this meant. For the first time in decades, Rachel's hold over us was gone. That night, I sat by the window and thought about the little girl Rachel once was, the child who had drawn us pictures of stick-figure families holding hands, the teenager who had laughed in the passenger seat of her first car. Those memories were real, but they belonged to someone else now, a version of my daughter that no longer existed. The woman she had become was someone who sent live snakes in packages and threatened her own parents. And now, for the first time, she would face the consequences of that. Life began to settle back into its rhythm. Linda and I enjoyed mornings without frantic phone calls, afternoons without panic, evenings without tension. We took walks through the neighborhood, noticing the ordinary joy of other families. The Henderson children riding bicycles, Mrs. Patterson tending her flowers. For once, I did not envy their peace. I felt it myself. The irony was not lost on me. Rachel had spent years threatening to cut us off from Emma and Jacob whenever we did not give her money. But by pushing too far, she had cut herself off permanently. Not only from us, but from the inheritance she coveted. The trust meant the children would be cared for, but Rachel would never see a dollar of it. Linda and I spoke quietly about the future. "Do you think she understands what she has lost?" she asked one evening as we sat at the kitchen table. "She will," I said. "When the money is gone, when the law is against her, she will understand. But by then, it will not matter. We are free." The words tasted strange in my mouth. Free. For 30 years I had been a safety net, catching Rachel every time she fell, even when she had jumped deliberately. I had told myself it was love. In truth, it was fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of losing the grandchildren. Fear of being alone. But love and fear are not the same. Love sets boundaries. Fear erases them. By choosing boundaries, I had chosen freedom. That night, I closed my eyes and slept without worry. For the first time in decades, I did not lie awake wondering what the next day's crisis would cost me. The storm had passed. If you liked this story, subscribe and share what you would have done in my place. To hear the next one, click on the box on the screen.